Hola chicas, and welcome to this episode of The Everyday Jefa. I am your host, Bessie Martinez, and I'm really excited to be coming to you, whether it's on any of your favorite platforms to listen to your podcast or on our YouTube channel. Remember, if you want to see the beautiful faces of my amazing guests, head on over to YouTube and you'll be able to see this entire podcast episode, but in video format. And so what is The Everyday Jefa? The Everyday Jefa is we are just everyday Latina women out there making Jefa moves, making boss moves, but not just in corporate America, not just in entrepreneurship, but just in our everyday lives. You know, for us, we are the eldest daughters, we are tias, we are abuelas, we are the neighbors, we are the women leading in our communities. And so here we are just bringing you another story of everyday Latina women out there creating impact in our communities, but also, being them, being women, being audacious and poderosas and poderistas and chingonas at the same time. And so I'm really excited that you're here and that you're listening to this episode or watching this episode. Remember to like, share, and follow if any of the content that we're producing for you all is of your liking. And also let us know what else are you wanting to watch or hear about, so that way we can make sure that we get those jefas onto our show. But without further ado, one of the things that I always love to do when I do an introduction with my guests is I always let them know that about 90% of the people that come onto this show, I've only met them maybe once via email or maybe just in very close proximity interactions, very snippets. I think this just happens with everyday life, right? You just transition, don't have that moment to sit down and really have a true conversation. So a lot of the times I get to know the guests just as much as you do. Today's guest is just like that. I met her through another organization. We're both part of a team, a squad, founder squad at that. But I'll let her tell her side of the story a little bit more. But that's the beauty of this, right? That's the beauty of the internet. That's the beauty of podcasting and storytelling. And my mission with this platform is to do exactly that, to show you what is out there, what is available for you, what are the resources, what are the things happening, and who are the people that are making it happen. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Ericka go ahead and introduce herself. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on the show. And please tell our viewers and our listeners who you are.
Buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. Bessie, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've admired you de lejos, virtually, and it's an honor to sit down with you. I'm Ericka Aviles. I'm the founder of Latinas Empower here in Nevada. I grew up in the beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, immigrated here from El Salvador at the age of 6, and really have planted my roots and community in our beautiful state of Nevada. I founded my own integrated marketing communications agency, multilingual, multicultural, 10 years ago. And now we're helping clients across the southwest part of the United States. It's an awesome to chat with you and dive deeper into the conversation. And I'm so thankful to the Power Squad with Poderistas for bringing us together and connecting us, because I think especially in times like today, I need that motivation and I need that inspiration. And women like you and everyday jefas around the country, around the world, are really what keep inspiring me to show up, be my authentic self, and echarle ganas.
Yeah, and I think I was having this conversation with somebody not too long ago, right? These spaces, and whether it's a virtual space or it's an in-person space, right? It's about seeing yourself reflected in those stories. We are all living different journeys, different paths, we're walking different shoes. However, there's some sort of interconnection at some point as we're navigating through life. But being able to know that, hey, somebody else is going through something similar to that just kind of gives you that boost of just, if they can do it, I can do it too. And of course, for me, I'm always going to say, I always tell everybody, proud Salvadoreña. I was also born there, migrated here when I was real little, so to be able to see a fellow Salvadoreña up there doing things, to me, it's just the proudness comes out through and through. And so shout out to all of our Salvadoreñas that are out there also, that are creating impact and just, making do with what they have, and so I kind of want to dive back, right? Go all the way almost to the beginning of your story, being that you came to El Salvador, when you were only 6 years old. What do you remember, if anything, from that transition? And what do you think of that transition has kind of helped you become and build the things that you're building now?
Yeah, so when we immigrated here, at the age of 6, I still remember a lot of things. And I think a lot of those memories also come up now that I get to go back. I have 2 little girls, my hubby, y todavía tengo familia. I still have family over there. And I think like many, I remember coming here, speaking Spanish, being a first generation. I still remember my teacher, Miss Agreda, when I was integrated into an ELL program here with Clark County School District, and just tackling that, right, is being able to, that's the only thing I knew, right, from that survival mode, and especially living in Las Vegas, as many can imagine, the Las Vegas Strip at that time in the late 80s and then había trabajo, there was work here. And that's where my tíos, my tías, my dad was a farm worker, in California. Everyone started migrating to Las Vegas. So I have a lot of fond memories of growing up on the Las Vegas Strip and building that community and planting roots. And I also have a lot of, hard memories, but also those that gave me that grit, that work ethic, that finding my way and finding my confidence and my story, because it's a lot of uncertainty, right? From everything. I'm the oldest, hermana, the oldest cousin, the oldest of figuring out going to high school, graduating from high school, going to college to now, like being a business owner. There was no first, or there was no one que me enseñara, right? And that's where really the power of mentors and sponsors and, I didn't even know what those words were until you get to that point, right? It was just really finding my own way and being, the oldest of figuring it out myself, but also figuring it out for my family. Obviously we're all learning the language at the same time, buying their first home, opening up our savings account, buying a car. Like we all did that together. And as the oldest, you kind of make the decisions for your parents when, they're working two jobs, making, trying to make ends meet. So I think all of that really prepared me, especially now as a business owner, to that point of view, right? Of putting myself in those. I do a lot of work in the community here in Las Vegas. What are those families going through? Because I went through a lot of that, and we still see that. And how do we continue helping all communities? I always say, Las Vegas has been so good to me. This is my way of how do I pay it forward, and helping those families, see themselves as otras niñas and other parents, like, hey, we did it and we can keep going, and let's keep striving para seguir adelante.
At what point do you feel like you perhaps said, you know what, my voice matters, my story matters, and then the ones of those that are similar to my journey, maybe not necessarily from El Salvador, but just in general, that, this is something that needs to be cultivated, needs to be honored, but also needs to be put on a platform or in spaces that are, oftentimes we're still not being represented, so what point in your journey did you say, you know what, something's got to give?
That's an amazing question. And I'm thinking back because I think there was specific moments, right? And especially right out of college, I went and worked within the MGM Resorts family, right? And on the Las Vegas Strip. And you're the only one of very few, right? In corporate America that is Latina. And you're working in mega resort properties, right? So I think one initial thing that comes to mind, and I think in different phases of my life and my career, when you saw it wasn't until corporate America and working in a hotel in my 20s that I saw other Latinos in corporate positions. All of my family growing up, we're the backbone of the hospitality industry. We clean our rooms, we clean the casino floors, we make everything look beautiful. That was mainly what I had been exposed to. And when I went into corporate, and I remember I was part of this management program, EV, and he's still my mentor, my friend, both of them, Jaime and Irene, wow, these are executives in corporate America in this big company, like, ¿por qué yo no también? And I said, like, I want your, we laugh about it now. I'm like, I want an office like you. I think that's te inspira confianza, right? So that was a little bit of that. And then I think as I evolved in my career and I, was promoted and I was recruited then to representing Destination Las Vegas with the Convention and Visitors Authority, there's value in speaking the language. And I'm so glad, que hablaba español, because, we're a melting pot here in the Valley. and we attract visitors from all over Latino America, todo el mundo, right? All over the world. And being able to bring that value that, you're personable, you speak the language, you understand those markets and those communities and the power of that connection and that what they've been going through. That was another time that I'm like, there's something going on here, and I think you're building your confidence because eso también, it comes with experience. And then most recently, obviously last year, I celebrated my 10-year business anniversary. And this year we celebrate 10 years of Latinas Empower. That I would say within these past 10 years, I mean, like I'm in my 40s now, right? That I'm like, my story as a mom, as a business owner, as a member of this community is powerful. So I would say I've grown into being in those spaces. Just recently, I was Friday, I was at a round table, obviously, the elections are coming up, from that aspect, and being able to be, feel comfortable and confident in my own skin and say, I'm raising my hand. This is what matters to me. But I think that took decades to feel that.
And I think one of the reasons why you and I are both in the Poderistas Power Squad there is because, of the work that we do when it comes to civic engagement. And I think when I heard those words come out of Charlotte's mouth, to me, it took me back because I don't think I ever saw myself, or it's not a word that you typically would hear for somebody that's doing community building or providing resources or just acknowledge that there's a gap and there's a need. At what point did you say civic engagement is where I want to be? Because I think it chose me, not the other.
Yes. Oh, man, you're so good at this. I think when I started the business within the first year, I also was pregnant with my first daughter. Right. And, very blessed. I have two girls now. And that's how really Latinas Empower was born, because you find yourself in these very difficult spaces sometimes not to mention the pregnancy aspect of it, but then daycare, the cultural nuances, the shame, the guilt, the todo lo que viene with being and that's how LIP was born, because I said, I need my tribe and my community to pour into me, because this is scary. This is overwhelming. And I think that's where, as we started coming together and growing, then we realized the power of advocating for one another, right? As moms, as business owners, as executives, like if we're not talking about our stories and what the struggles and the support that we need, so me escogió a me, right? It chose me in that aspect of things. Then nobody else is going to be doing it, and I think that's why I also started the business, because I didn't want to be seen as like a check mark, right? Oh, let's reach out to the diverse communities. Let's reach out to the Hispanic community. And I think that's why I was very passionate, and I saw that need to say, I want to be more than a check mark. I want to be engaged with. And that's how just, within the business and Latinas Empower, that's continued to evolve. And now, we're across the state of Nevada, and that women come up to me and say, right, thank you for making these safe spaces and bringing us together and being that motivation and inspiration to say, here's what I need help with. Not just personally, but professionally, right? Is I just connected someone, they have a job interview. Like, how do we get their resume to the right people? How do we prepare? What insights can we have? So it's really that advocacy in so many ways, that it's right. It continues to evolve.
So, like I mentioned right before, civic engagement was something that was not part of my everyday vocabulary. I think I've learned a lot more words. I've known about them, and I probably have been part of certain descriptive acronyms or whatnot, but never really truly understood, because it's not something you talk about, right? Especially, and I don't know if it's just a Latino household or what it is, but I know this was not a conversation that was brought up to my attention when I was younger, So for somebody that's out there going, okay, I've heard this word too, but what does it really mean? In your definition, what does civic engagement mean?
To me, it's raising your hand, showing up, empowering and opening doors for one another. And we all have our different ways of doing it. I think and that's what I've learned through other women like you, across the country through, Poderistas is we can all make our own way to be civically engaged. It means voting. It means educating ourselves, right? Educating ourselves on what is important to me, what aligns with my values, and continuing to have presence and take up that space, whether it is, again, in the meeting room, at a town hall, through our voting, it's showing up.
Yeah, because people seem to, and that's just based on the landscape, and I think it has to do a lot too with the landscape that we have been in, probably in the trajectory of the last 4 to 8 years, where civic engagement has kind of taken its own little life. That being civically engaged isn't necessarily just in the political space, but being civically engaged is also in corporate America when it comes to, let's say, for example, a company is being acquired, right? And that comes with a bunch of changes, right? And so saying, hey, I don't think this is going to work out, you are already civically engaging.
Mhm.
And so I think there's so much stigma that civil engagement only pertains to a certain topic when it actually is in everything and every part of our everyday lives, to be honest, because it's part of a change, whether it's something we like and we approve, or it's a change that we disapprove and we're against.
Mhm.
You mentioned this earlier about check marking a box, right? And I think now more than ever, the conversation around how do you engage with your civic duties, or how do you engage with the communities that doesn't just follow a let's check mark the box out now, because organizations and communities are now realizing and saying,
Yes.
hey, sorry, that used to maybe work before but not anymore. I'm not just a box that you can come and check mark. Like, I need you to be really intentional. What do you think is the lacking in communication when it comes to how people can actually be better at having conversations?
Mhm. I think from a lacking is, and because I work in marketing and communications, obviously, there's generalizations and stereotypes, right, of what it is. I had someone tell me the other day, oh yeah, we use Google Translate now on our website, like, hey, and I'm like, that doesn't really, like we're in 26, right? And like you're giving yourself kudos because now you have Google Translate on your website, right? I think it's the education aspect of things, of really it's more than just, and I just spoke on a panel on this a couple weeks ago, it's more than just the Hispanic Heritage Month or Fiestas
Mm-hmm.
Patrias. And I live in Las Vegas. Over 30% of our community identifies as Hispanic here. It's more than being those key periods. It's really, how do you ingrain yourself? And I don't think people have ever been people that are trying to talk to us and communicate and engage with us. They have to put themselves in our shoes, right? And I don't think sometimes we don't, that is not being done enough of. And having civil conversations too, right? And that's where I don't mind having coffee with people. And I've become this neutral and space, in my community, and within the business community, I'm very engaged with that. People will call and ask me for my point of view, right? And I think sometimes we're not even asked, or we're not even invited to have a seat at the table, or we're not even, how does these changes of, we're trying to pass legislation, we're trying to build a new XYZ, sports team, we're trying to, all of these things. Has anyone considered, what does the community want? And that's where, let's engage and ask the community what they
Yeah.
want.
And I think it could also be their, in some sense, they're scared. There are those people, because I have met those people where they truly want to respect and honor the culture, but they don't even know how to ask,
Yes.
because some of us do come defensive. Does that make sense? And so that shies them away, saying, well, why am I going to even bother to ask if I'm just going to get attacked? When honestly, genuinely, I really, truly do want to know, and I want to learn the things, right? And it can also go even within our own culture
Mhm.
and community, right? There, we have our Afro Latinos, and some of us are like, well, we don't want to ask the question, but you're part of, we are intertwined in some,
Yeah.
and so that communication part, I mean, I think it's one of those crucial where in any kind of relationship, whether it's community relationship or civic relationship or even just family relationship, it's how do we come out of that mindset of being scared to just ask the question.
Yes.
I think back to when I was a kid, somebody said that the dumbest question was the question that was never asked. You have to ask in order to learn. That's part of growth, and it only benefits our community in the end.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm still educating myself, right?
Mhm.
We continue to grow as a community. I don't know what I don't know, and I think that's where that trust building and that relationship building and creating those spaces for safe conversations, because I think people are having those conversations, but not everything has to be vocal and upfront and on social
Mhm.
media, right? And that's what I appreciate, with just my colleagues in the community, with friends, with family, like help me educate me on this because I don't know, I don't claim to know it all, and I think that's where, anyone that I think is you just have to continue showing up, building that rapport, building that relationship to be able to say, and I even feel like with you, like that's where inspiran confianza, right? That it's like you're showing up for that community, you're showing up for one another. You may agree to disagree, but that you can still call you and say, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Because I'm scared. Do I do this? Do I not? And I think there is more fear amongst a lot of things right now. And I think being able to build those rapport and relationship and trust is so crucial to be able to take that leap of faith and make those decisions. And it's that leadership and that to show us the community, like, here's what we stand for.
Well, I also want to go ahead and make a point and hold space for your 10-year work, your business anniversary. I mean, it's amazing and beautiful to be able to hear, but not only that you turned 10 years, but then also that you're in an award-winning agency in the Nevada area. It's something to totally be aspiring to, totally doable, in my opinion. Yes, it comes with a lot of additional things in entrepreneurship. I think it is the most spiritually engaged pathway to go. But what made you want to become an entrepreneur in the first place?
I always, I'm thinking about that. I knew I always wanted to do more. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I knew in corporate America, you report to others, right? There's structures and there's hierarchies but there's safety, right? There's a consistent paycheck. There's all the things that come with that. And I think for me though, it's like Cynthia, I felt like I think I want to do more. I can do more. I didn't even know what that was. In my head, I had a rough vision of what that concept was of community outreach and how do I engage. And, I just knew que aspiraba to more, and I think that's where our parents make all these sacrifices for us. The community, how do I give back and how do I continue sharing my story and sharing, like, we can be business owners and we can be successful business owners and we can work on building wealth and opening doors and showing others that they can do it too. And I think that's why I had a rough concept, but it was really that leap of faith and others believing in me when honestly I'm like, I didn't know how much I believed in myself there at certain parts. And now 10 years later, there's still scary moments.
Yeah.
There's still uncertainty. There's still, and that's where the ganas kick in, but I think every day, as long as I share this and I share this with my team, every day that I still wake up and I feel excited and driven and motivated and know that I'm making my own little impact one way or another, I'm going to keep doing this, and now to me, it's where I need that inspiration from others is why just Nevada? Why not the Southwest? Why not national?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're the first, there's also, you're learning as you're going.
Yeah.
And that's where, what do these next 10 years for me look like? Is I'm challenging myself to dream bigger, for the business as well as even, within Latinas Empower, this membership, professional networking organization is how do I dream both bigger?
And I mean, you're in a city that just like any other large city, right? Yeah, we speak about the LAs and the Miamis and the New Yorks of the world, right? But Vegas is also very fast paced, So how are you building your business and how are you not monetarily scaling per se, but just scaling it and having those bigger visions of wanting to do more in a city that's continuously go, go, go?
Yeah.
Because I live, being in the Austin area, there is a little bit of that southern slowdown, but it's still, and it's growing faster than it was 5 years ago. So to me, sometimes I'm like, how do I do the things while this thing is moving and then not get caught up with all of the movement too?
Yes, yes, and try to be a mom and a wife and all those things. And
Yes.
it's and we chatted a little bit about the mental health and wellness, because all of this comes with a lot of pressure. And I'm not gonna lie, it's there's some weeks that are just fatiguing, in that sense, because we're wearing all these hats. When I started the business, I thought it was going to be me, myself, and I. Let me take Fridays off. I'm going to have 3 days off. Voy a trabajar 9 to 12. Like I'm like, what? What was I thinking? Because
In
obviously,
what world would that be?
well, what world would that be? And that's where I just had a concept, and I'm like, let me try this out. I haven't rested a day in my, other than when I go to El Salvador on December, on Christmas, that's become our thing. Is that's when I really do feel like I get to unplug, and y descansar. But I think from a maintaining, obviously, now that I have a bigger team, I do, and it takes a while to build that team, to your point of everything from the business and my executive assistant to my project managers or graphic designers that really make the business look good, to everything from, within LIP, our advisory committee, our events committee, our sponsors. Like, eso es lo que me da that opportunity to also know that, hey, we have it under control. I can unplug, and the next day I can feel energized to be in those spaces, because in a fast paced city and in a purple state, there's a lot of things that impact us. And that's where me da esa energía and that empowerment to show up in those rooms. And while my team is executing on campaigns, on efforts that I could say, how are we considering the community? Have you thought about this? And really making sure that we, whether me or anyone else, that do we have a seat at the table?
What do you think would be the misconception about a company like yours that is also heavily sitting on the civic engagement side of things that you think people should know about? Like, kind of be like, nope, I've heard it more times than other, but honestly, this is really the reality.
Yes, I think when we think about marketing and communications, when I started the business, it's, well, you're just Hispanic marketing or Hispanic community outreach. And I'm like, no, I'm general marketing and communications. I can do all the things. My plus, and here's an added value, is that I can also do things in other languages, right? And I think people, or in general, we get pigeonholed into these spaces or these areas. And in my mind, I'm like, I can be on the Nevada Restaurant Association board, which I just joined. I can be on the Latin Chamber of Commerce. I can do both. Like, don't pigeonhole me into, I can only do one or the other. So I think that's something I hear a lot about. And, I think also it takes time and research and investment. It's not, I think people are like, oh, well, let's run a campaign and we want immediate satisfaction, immediate results. Like, that doesn't happen overnight, in a time when you're really trying to ingrain yourself. It's that investment, and not an investment in time, but also monetary, right? I think people, again, want immediate results. And this is, no, what are you doing? How are we aligning with what it is that your target audience or campaign? It's not, and it goes back to, like, it's not just a check mark. Let's do one thing and call it a day and expect that todo salió bien.
Yeah, it's also part of that cultivation of relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just get an audience, especially if you're a company organization that's using marketing for a long-term and consistency than an overnight success, is what I was telling me. If you want instant gratification, overnight success, pero así como llegó, así se va a ir.
Yes.
But if you're looking for long-term success and growth and relationship building with your audience, your consumer, whatever that case might be, then there's baby steps to that.
Yes. Yeah.
We as a consumers only see the last result, but there's like so much that happens in the background too. But yeah, like I mean, to your point, it's more than just that check mark box. I was looking at something yesterday, you know, as we've been rolling into this our upcoming first event of the year, and not that I was feeling down, I was just tired, and your mind tends to spiral sometimes when you're in exhaustion. And I saw a video that we presented at our fundraiser last year. And I'm like, this is why I do what I do. And this is why I love doing in those days that are really hard. So what is it? What have you, is it a project? Was it a moment that you were like, and this is why I do what I do?
My oldest came home a couple of months ago with a certificate. It's still on our fridge. She came, you know, they do like recognitions in schools. And she came home with a certificate and it said, future CEO. And, you know, I don't know, they had been doing some sort of project and, you know, you get a voting something. And, you know, it just filled me with so much pride and joy because I have these two little sponges that are absorbing everything. And the fact, you know, they see me getting ready, they see me running around like a chicken with my head cut off sometimes, but to know that they're seeing their mom working, I'm bringing them to events, I'm bringing them to meetings, I tell them what's going on. I think personally that's what really drives me is obviously that component that I know I'm doing my part to make that next generation, you know, and that's where with them, I'm very engaged with my high school still. I work with a lot of projects in education with College of Southern Nevada, like to know that we're making those safe spaces to take up room, raise our hand, you know, and have that presence is really, there's little points every day that I feel that motivation and inspiration and being in safe spaces and having these conversations with you, right? I'm like, this, you know, Bessie's kicking butt on LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, like this girl, you know, it's that motivation, you know, that on days, because we do have tough days. I had last week, we have to pause a project. The week before, you know, right? Things happen.
Yeah.
And I think those little moments of inspiration and before, I don't think we talked enough and we gave ourselves that pat on the back and that congratulations to say, here's what I'm doing. It's really, whether we're doing it online or face to face, that's what inspires me.
So if there is somebody out there that has a younger one, a younger Latinita, you know, whether it's the granddaughter, the daughter, the niece, whatever, what should we be telling them or showing them to remind them that Latinas do belong in these rooms and that we don't need to have the permission or have somebody validate us to take up space?
We should be telling them, you know, to right, we are beautiful inside and out. We come from families of hard workers. I instill in my daughters, right? Our ancestors, our abuelitos, our abuelitas, they cleaned rooms, they mopped our floors, they did all of these things to give us these spaces to be where we're at today. And to remember where we come from, you know, I think that's a big component of it. Here's what we went through. Here is what mom's going through now. Like, I don't just say, oh, mom just got a contract. I also say, mom just lost a contract. You know, we had to put a pause. So I think now as they're getting older, reality of the struggles that we face every day and explaining that to them. And I think you're a storyteller. Those stories are really important for me to share with them. So I think it's, you know, continuing to inspire them of our roots and our families and the sacrifices that they made for us, as well as, you know, the day to day of here's what I'm going through and here is what you may have to go through. But here's how we're going to overcome it together. Because they're with me in the car when I'll pick them up from school, having conversations with clients, with partners. lo escuchan todo, and I think that's where it's okay to talk about that. And where in my time, potentially, like we didn't know those words. We didn't know that it was okay to say, we came here, one way or another, right? Antes no podíamos hablar de eso. And I think the more we can talk about it, the more they feel empowered to talk about it.
So as we're sharing our experiences and our journeys, what are you hoping that these young girls are able to get and hopefully execute on as they get older? Because this generation that a lot of us are raising is not the same generation the way that we were being raised,
Yes.
right? Especially with it being so heavily digital, and even for us as the adults, sometimes we don't know what is real and what isn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Much less them, right? And so if we're wanting them to be able to take up maybe even a step up in the civic engagement, if we're the ones that don't really even know what civic engagement is, how do we portray that to them? How do we explain that to them so that they can feel the full backing of what it means to be civically engaged?
Yeah, I think it's continuing to, when I was in college or even when I was in high school, and, I'm still friends with my school principal. I think it's, those seeking those mentors, seeking those sponsors, raising your hand. I can't stress that enough. When there was times to go to a conference, to go to a training, to go to a field trip, it was always, let me raise my hand and put myself outside of my comfort zone to be exposed more to the world. We can tend to live in a bubble sometimes. And I think for young, and regardless of what age, is continuing to put ourselves outside of that comfort zone and raising our hand, owning your voice, owning your power, and know that, right, we each have a unique story and perspective, and that it's okay to share that. And it's okay to, find your calling and find your passion. And I think that's how you just start exploring and you're finding what it is that you do as a career. In my head, did I ever think I was going to be an entrepreneur? Not really. I wanted to be the CEO of a hotel.
Something.
Of a hotel, and now eso en mi mente. I'm like, I went to school. I went to work in casinos because, right. And now I'm like, look, I'm the CEO and I feel like I'm making a bigger impact as a small business owner. Like I'm not a 6,000 room property, but I'm the CEO of my business, my life, and what I do for the community. And I think, but that toma tiempo, toma finding your voice, your confidence. And I'm still figuring it out too, especially as we'll have preteens one day, right. I think all of that will continue to evolve.
So, there's that saying that goes, you don't know what you don't know, right? And we kind of talked a little bit about it at the very beginning on how, I know I've always said it and I don't shy away from it, especially now more than ever. I don't know all the things and I don't want to be the smartest person in the room because I just kind of halt myself in my own personal growth. But for somebody that's like, okay, I kind of understand now what civic engagement means. Where do I start? So what would your advice be for them? Like you talked a little bit about finding your passion and finding things that you truly love and that you want to either learn more about. So we figured that part out. Okay, then what's next?
Yes, the easiest thing is voting, obviously with elections around the corner, local elections. I think, the great thing about, at least here in Nevada, and I would hope so in other states, our elected officials are very accessible. I probably am getting 10 texts a day for coffees, pop-up events, things like that. I would say show up to one of those and, see what those are like and see what they're talking about. I think sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves, like we have to go show up and give a speech and talk, but it's also okay to show up and take it in and just listen in. I think that's come to mind, right away. I think obviously depending on what stage in our career we're in, whether it is high school or college or corporate America, I do appreciate there are companies, organizations, clubs, groups are creating more safe spaces for people, regardless of what age we are, to have these other, go into an event, go in and have a conversation, going, et cetera, right? So I think that's where finding those spaces that you feel that you can be, safe in, take up space in, and network. Obviously, there's power in networking. And I've met so many youth that, got started at the Latin Chamber of Commerce and now they're running for public office. That's so awesome to hear that. And I think that you just find you're finding your way. And I think it's showing up in spaces that you normally may have not been to in the past and seeing what you like, how you want to be civically engaged. Maybe it is going to a business networking luncheon, or maybe it is going to a march or a gathering or a town hall. It could be so many different things. And that's where you continue to find what you enjoy doing.
Yeah. And I mean, not everything's going to be your cup of tea, but then you won't know unless you go out there and you kind of put yourself, it's kind of reminding yourself that fear is always going to exist, but showing up just in general, just being present helps combat that.
Yeah.
It's been, it's been a beautiful, interesting journey in this whole civic engagement thing. Cause at first I think I even shied away from it. I'm like, no, that's not what I do. But then I sat down and I'm like, okay, why am I so against that word, right? If it's really describing everything that I'm currently doing, why? But again, it's back to that communications, the understanding, the more people are speaking up about what is the definition of civic engagement and what does that really mean in action. And so really, truly appreciate that, because that, everything you just mentioned can be found really anywhere. You don't have to just be in Nevada, Las Vegas. You can be really anywhere and find those opportunities. So I highly encourage all of my jefas to, if this is something of interest to you, that you're just curious and learning on what it is that, how do you fit into this bigger picture? Ask somebody else. I'm pretty sure in your group, family group, friend group, peer group, somebody's already involved in civic engagement, and start asking those questions.
For sure. For sure.
So my question to you is, with all the things that you've been doing, what do you want to leave behind to be that people remember you for? And I'm not saying you've passed on to another life. We're just saying, Ericka decided to take a step back and say, you know what, I've done all the things. I've been in all the places. I've received all of the things. Now it's time to truly just cansadita and then relajadita and just really enjoy whatever's around me. But what is it that you want people to be able to look back and say, Ericka did, and then fill in the blank?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, first I'm thinking about having that relajación in una casa en El Salvador, right?
Yeah.
I think Ericka, she set her mind on something and she accomplished it. I think, here, una niña salvadoreña, English as her first language, first of many in her family to do it all. Like, she showed us what we are all capable of doing.
What does being an everyday jefa mean to you?
Everyday jefa means showing up, taking up space, killing them with kindness. And I'm here, I am seen, I am visible. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams.
And if there could be one thing that you would like the viewers or the listeners, the jefas, the everyday jefas that are joining us today, to walk away from our conversation, what would that be?
Everyday jefas, look me up if you're ever in Las Vegas. I think what's that one thing? There's power in community.
Mm-hmm.
There's power in estas conexiones. Don't shy from leaning on that, leaning into community. Don't shy away from that. We're here for one another. We're here to keep, opening doors for one another and inspiring one another. Todas somos Latinas Empower.
Where can they find you or support you or be able to catch up with all things Ericka?
ErickaAviles.com, at Ericka Aviles on all my social media handles.
Well, jefitas, you heard it. I am so excited for you to all go and start beginning and taking actions in your own jefita worlds. These are the conversations I love to have, because it's also a reminder for all of us how sometimes we don't put certain labels on the things that we already do, but when we really sit down and take a pause, we're already being active in our communities. And Ericka has been a true example on the things that she's doing in Nevada, in Las Vegas, through her journey. We could have talked probably way longer. in this. That's usually how it goes. This conversation was amazing. This conversation truly was, even for myself, something that I needed as a reminder that, there's so much poder in just the little, some smallest things that we do every single day. I think the whole point of it all is really to move forward with it, right? And just keep showing up. I think that's been more said than other this year. Just keep up taking space and keep just showing up. And so thank you so much, Ericka, for everything that you're doing for the community there in Nevada. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing as an entrepreneur and just continuing to inspire generations just like your daughter and those generations, those of us that have Latinas in our lives too. I hope that we are able to lead the pathway for them, so that they can become way more successful in their own terms with all of the knowledge that you've just shared with us today. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Un orgullo. Thank you so much.
All right, chicas, nos vemos. Hasta la próxima. Remember, like, share, and comment in this episode. If there is something out there that you're wanting for us to discuss, let us know. You can find us on all social media platforms, including LinkedIn, the Everyday Jefa podcast on Instagram, and nos vemos a la próxima. Hasta luego, jefas.